$500. That was the bill the man in the pristine white gutra waved in the air, not as a payment, but as a weapon. He snapped his fingers, the crisp sound cutting through the hushed elegance of Le Chateau, demanding attention like a spoiled child. He looked at the waitress, Natalie, with eyes that didn't see a person but a servant, a piece of furniture with a pulse. He thought she was just another broke girl in a uniform, invisible and desperate. He thought his $50 million scam was airtight, sealed with fake royalty and arrogance. He was wrong, because when he whispered his final, fatal mistake into his phone in a dialect he thought no one in New York understood, he didn't know that the girl pouring his water wasn't just a waitress. She was listening, and she was about to burn his entire world to the ground. The clinking of silver forks against fine china was the heartbeat of Le Chateau. It was a rhythm Natalie Hart knew better than her own pulse. At 26, she had mastered the art of being invisible. In a place where a bottle of wine cost more than her rent, visibility was a liability. You didn't want to be seen. You wanted to be a ghost that refilled water glasses and replaced napkins before the wealthy patrons even realized they were soiled. Table 4 needs a refresh on the Bollinger. Move it, Hart, the floor manager Henry hissed as he breezed past her, clutching a tablet like it was a holy text. Henry was a man who believed stress was a management style. He sweated through his suits by 7 p.m. and took it out on the staff by 7:15. On it, Natalie said, her voice steady. She adjusted her apron, smoothing the stark black fabric over her waist. Her feet ached, a sharp, throbbing reminder of the double shift she'd pulled yesterday. But her face remained a mask of polite indifference. She moved through the dining room with practiced grace, weaving between tables occupied by senators, tech moguls, and trust fund socialites. Le Chateau wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater for the elite of Manhattan. Tonight, however, the spotlight was monopolized by the party at the center table, the royal table, as Henry had breathlessly called it during the pre-shift briefing. Seated there was a man who had demanded to be addressed only as Your Highness. He was flanked by 2 burly men in dark suits who looked less like security and more like hired muscle from a bad action movie. Opposite him sat an older, nervous-looking man named Arthur Pendleton. Natalie recognized him from the business pages. Pendleton was the CEO of Apex Construction, a massive firm that had been struggling with liquidity issues lately. He looked like a man drowning, and the prince across from him looked like the only life raft in the ocean. More champagne, the prince commanded as Natalie approached. He didn't look at her. He gestured with a dismissive flick of his wrist, his heavy gold watch catching the chandelier light. He was dressed in traditional thobe and gutra, but there was something about the way he wore it, slightly askew, a bit too theatrical, that pricked at the back of Natalie's mind. "Certainly, sir," Natalie said softly. She reached for the bottle in the ice bucket, her movements precise. "Careful," one of the bodyguards grunted, leaning in. "Do not touch His Highness." "I'm just pouring the wine," Natalie said, keeping her eyes lowered. "Let the girl work, brute," the prince laughed. It was a cold, wet sound. He turned his attention back to Pendleton. "As I was saying, Mr. Pendleton, the investment fund operates on total discretion. 50 million is the entry ticket. But the returns? They are astronomical. We are building the future in the desert, a city of glass and gold." Natalie poured the champagne, the golden liquid frothing perfectly. As she did, she glanced at the table. Papers were spread out. Blueprints, bank transfer authorizations, and a glossy brochure for something called the Oasis Project. I understand," Pendleton stammered, wiping sweat from his receding hairline. "It's just, 50 million is a significant portion of our remaining capital. I need to be sure the sovereign fund is actually backing this." The prince's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You question my honor? You question the House of Almere?" No, of course not, Your Highness." Pendleton looked terrified. "It's just due diligence. My board—" "Your board is made up of cowards," the prince sneered. He picked up his glass. "I offer you salvation, and you ask for paperwork. Perhaps I should take this opportunity to the Germans." They were very eager. Natalie finished pouring and took a step back. She should have walked away. She should have gone back to the kitchen, grabbed a tray of appetizers for table 7, and forgotten she existed. But something kept her rooted. It was the accent. The prince spoke perfect English, slick and polished, with just the right amount of glottal stops to sound authentic to an untrained ear. But Natalie had spent her childhood in a very different world. Her father had been a senior diplomat, and she had spent 15 years living between Riyadh, Dubai, and Amman. She didn't just speak Arabic, she dreamt in it. She knew the dialects, the slang, the rhythm of the streets and the palaces. And this man, this prince, he had just pronounced the name of his own supposed house with a hard American R buried deep in his throat. He's fake, she thought, the realization hitting her like a splash of ice water. He's not a prince, he's a shark. Girl, the prince snapped. Natalie blinked, snapping back to reality. Yes, sir. Take this away, he gestured to a barely touched plate of Wagyu beef. It is cold. Inedible. Tell your chef he is an insult to his profession. I will inform him immediately, Natalie said. She reached for the plate. And bring me another bottle. The vintage needs to be older. This tastes like vinegar. He waved the $500 bottle of crystal away like it was tap water. Of course. As Natalie retreated to the kitchen, her heart was hammering against her ribs. She navigated the swinging doors and was immediately hit by the wall of heat and noise from the line. He sent the Wagyu back, Natalie told the expeditor, a terrifying woman named Chef Marie. He what? Marie turned, a knife in hand. That Wagyu is perfect. He's eaten one bite. He says it's cold, and he wants an older vintage of champagne. Henry materialized out of nowhere, looking panic-stricken. Give him whatever he wants. Do you know who that is? That is Sheikh Almir. He's rumored to be buying the entire block. If he's happy, we all get bonuses. If he's unhappy, I'm firing everyone in this section. Do you understand, Hart? Henry, I think... Natalie started, then stopped. What was she going to say? I think he's a con artist because his accent slipped. Henry would laugh in her face, or worse, fire her for slander. She needed this job. Her student loans for the law degree she was slowly chipping away at were crushing her. You think what? Henry demanded, his face inches from hers. I think we should get the 2004 vintage, she improvised. Good, go, run. Natalie grabbed the expensive bottle from the cellar and headed back out. As she approached the table, the dynamic had shifted. Pendleton looked defeated. He had a pen in his hand, hovering over a document. It is a wire transfer authorization, the prince was saying, his voice low and soothing, like a predator calming prey. Once the funds clear tonight, the contract is binding. We break ground on Monday. Tonight? Pendleton asked weakly. Global markets do not sleep, Arthur, and neither does opportunity. Natalie began to pour the new champagne. As she did, the prince's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, annoyance flashing across his face. He held up a hand to Pendleton. One moment, a call from the palace. The prince picked up the phone and pressed it to his ear. He turned his body slightly away from Pendleton, shielding his mouth with his hand. He assumed confidently that no one in this New York restaurant, certainly not the terrified businessman or the blonde waitress, could understand him. He began to speak in Arabic. But it wasn't the refined classical Arabic of a royal court. It wasn't even the Gulf dialect of the region he claimed to rule. It was broken, clumsy, and heavily accented with something that sounded distinctly Bostonian. Nam nam, the prince said into the phone. Yes, yes. Then he switched to English, but kept his voice low. Look, just keep the jet on standby. No, I don't care about the fuel cost. Then he switched back to Arabic, likely trying to impress Pendleton with the sound of the language. Al-Fulus, coming. The money, coming. Natalie froze, her hand holding the bottle tightened. Al-Fulus, a prince wouldn't talk about cash like a street vendor. Then came the kicker. The person on the other end of the line must have asked something specific, because the prince replied in Arabic, clearly reciting a phrase he had memorized but didn't fully grasp. Ana donkey. Natalie choked. She actually let out a short, sharp gasp of air. The prince had meant to say Ana jahez, I am ready, or perhaps Ana huna, I am here. Instead, he had used a word that sounded similar to a non-speaker but meant something very different. He had just called himself a donkey. The table went silent. The prince whipped his head around, his eyes locking onto Natalie. The arrogance vanished for a split second, replaced by cold suspicion. "Is something funny, girl?" he asked, his voice dangerous. Pendleton looked up, confused. "What happened?" "The waitress," the prince sneered, recovering his composure. "She seems to lack the discipline required for high service." She gasped in my ear. "I apologize, sir," Natalie said, lowering her head quickly. I just tripped slightly." "The carpet." The prince studied her for a long, agonizing moment. He looked at her blonde hair, her blue uniform, her lowered eyes. He saw nothing but submission. He relaxed. "Clumsy," he muttered. He turned back to the phone and said, in English this time, "I will call you back." He hung up and looked at Pendleton. "My brother. He sends his regards." "Right, yes," Pendleton said. "About the transfer. Sign it, Arthur. Be a king for once in your life." Natalie stepped back, her mind racing. He wasn't just a fake, he was a bad fake. But he was good enough to fool a desperate man like Pendleton. $50 million. If Pendleton signed that paper, his company would collapse. Hundreds of people would lose their jobs. This man, this prince, would vanish into the ether. She walked back to the service station. She couldn't just watch, but she couldn't just speak up. If she accused a VIP guest of fraud without proof, she'd be arrested. She needed to be smart. She needed to be tactical. She looked across the room. At the bar, scrolling on his phone, was a man she recognized, Tobias Reed. He was the investigative journalist for the New York Chronicle. He was a regular, usually drinking cheap scotch and tipping moderately. He was known for exposing corruption in the city's zoning board last year. Natalie looked at the prince, then at Tobias. Then she looked at the napkin in her hand. She grabbed a pen. She didn't write a note in English. If the note was intercepted, she'd be fired immediately. She needed to test the waters. She needed to see if the prince would react to a direct challenge, one that only a true speaker or a panicked fraud would understand. But first, she needed to get close again. "Henry," Natalie called out softly. The manager stormed over. "What now?" "Table 4, she said, her voice trembling just enough to sell it. "The prince, he asked for the special dessert menu, the gold leaf cake." Henry's eyes widened. "The $1,000 slice? Excellent. Go, sell it to him." Natalie nodded. She picked up the dessert menu. She slipped the pen into her apron. She walked back into the lion's den, but this time she wasn't the prey. She was the hunter. As she reached the table, Pendleton's pen was touching the paper. "One moment, gentlemen," Natalie said, her voice projecting more confidence than she felt. "Compliments of the house, a preview of our dessert selection." She placed the menu down directly over the contract Pendleton was signing. "What is the meaning of this?" The prince snarled, slamming his hand down. "A gift, Your Highness," Natalie said. She looked him dead in the eye. "And a question." She leaned in, purportedly to adjust the cutlery, and whispered a single sentence. She didn't whisper it in English. She whispered it in the Gulf Arabic dialect, the specific dialect of the region he claimed to rule. "Min aina sarakta hada al-thawb, ya khanzir." "Where did you steal that robe, you pig?" It was a gamble. A massive, dangerous gamble. If he was real, he would be outraged. He would have her fired, maybe arrested for insulting royalty. If he was a fake who didn't speak the language, he would look confused. But if he was a fake who knew he was being tested... The prince froze. His eyes didn't fill with confusion. They filled with pure, unadulterated panic. He understood the tone. He understood he was being addressed in the language he was pretending to own. But he didn't know how to respond. "Excuse me," he said in English, his voice cracking. "What? What did you say?" Natalie smiled, a cold, sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I asked if you wanted the chocolate or the vanilla, sir," she lied smoothly in English, "but you seem flustered. Is the air conditioning too high?" She had him. He didn't know what she had said, but he knew she knew. The game was on. The silence that followed Natalie's question hung over the table like a guillotine blade. For 3 seconds, the prince, whose name on the reservation was listed as Sheikh Zayed Al-Mir, looked like a deer in headlights. But con artists are nothing if not adaptable. The panic in his eyes flickered out, replaced instantly by a sneer of indignation. I do not speak to servants, Zayed hissed, dismissing her with a wave of his hand that was meant to look regal, but just looked jerky. He turned his back on her, focusing entirely on Arthur Pendleton. Arthur, the time for hesitation is over. The window for the transfer closes in 10 minutes. If the funds are not in the escrow account by 9 p.m., the deal dissolves. I cannot hold the land for you. The Chinese consortium is waiting. Natalie stepped back, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had taken a shot, and it had grazed him, but it hadn't killed the deal. Pendleton looked sick. His hand was shaking so badly, the pen was vibrating against the contract. I'm doing it now, Your Highness, Pendleton stammered. He pulled out a sleek black secure token device, the kind used for high-level corporate banking. Natalie retreated to the service station, her mind racing. She needed help. She glanced at the bar. Tobias Reed, the investigative journalist, was still nursing his drink, oblivious to the heist happening 20 feet away. Henry, Natalie hissed. The manager materialized, his face a mask of stress. What is it now, Hart? Why are you lingering? The prince looks annoyed. Henry, listen to me, Natalie said, her voice low and urgent. You have to delay the check. You have to delay everything. Are you insane? Henry's eyes bulged. Delay? I want them out of here happy so I can go home and have a scotch. Why would I delay? Because he's not a prince, Henry. He's a fraud. Henry stared at her for a long moment, then let out a short, incredulous laugh. A fraud? Look at the suit, Natalie. Look at the watch. That's a Patek Philippe. It costs more than this building. You're tired. You're working a double. Go back out there, pour the water, and shut up. He doesn't speak Arabic, Natalie argued, grabbing Henry's arm. I lived in the Gulf for 6 years, Henry. You know my dad was with the State Department. This guy? He's speaking gibberish mixed with basic tourist phrases. He just called himself a donkey on the phone. Henry pulled his arm away, his expression hardening. Your father was a diplomat, Natalie. Keyword, was. Now you're a waitress. And if you disrupt my VIP table, you won't even be that. Get back to work. He shoved a silver tray of fresh warm bread into her hands. Go. Natalie gripped the tray, her knuckles white. She had no allies, just her wits and a tray of sourdough. She walked back toward the table, her mind working through the geometry of the room. The bodyguards were the problem. They were positioned to block any direct approach to the prince. But they were bored. One was watching the door, the other was watching the kitchen. Neither was watching the floor. As she approached, she saw Pendleton typing a code into his secure token. The green light on the device blinked. He's authorizing the transfer. She had maybe 60 seconds. She reached the table and placed the bread down, but she didn't leave. She stood there, hovering just a little too close, invading the prince's personal space. More bread, Your Highness? She asked loudly. No, Zayed snapped without looking up. Go away. Are you sure? It is fresh from the oven, unlike other things. Zayed whipped his head around. What is your problem, woman? I was just admiring your watch, sir, Natalie said, her voice dripping with innocent sweetness. It is a Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime, isn't it? Very rare. Zayed puffed up slightly, his ego taking the bait. Yes, it is a custom piece, a gift from the Sultan. Amazing, Natalie said. I didn't know the Sultan gave gifts with quartz movement. The table went deadly silent again. What? Zayed demanded. The second hand, Natalie pointed. It's ticking. Tick, tick, tick. A real Grandmaster chime is mechanical. The hand sweeps. That watch is a battery-operated fake. You can buy them on Canal Street for $40. Pendleton looked up from his banking device. He looked at the watch. He looked at Natalie. She's lying, Zayed shouted, standing up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. She is insolent. Security. One of the bodyguards stepped forward, his hand reaching inside his jacket. Is there a problem, sir? Remove this woman, Zayed screamed. She is insulting my honor. Arthur, sign the damn transfer. Wait, Pendleton said. His voice was small but firm. He looked at the watch again. It is ticking. It is a special mechanism, Zayed yelled, sweat breaking out on his forehead. Are you going to take financial advice from a waitress over a royal prince? Arthur, look at me. I am offering you the deal of a lifetime. Sir, the bodyguard said to Natalie, gripping her arm hard enough to bruise, You need to come with me. Get your hands off me, Natalie said, her voice shifting from the polite server to something much colder. She didn't struggle. She just looked at the bodyguard with eyes that had seen more diplomatic crises than he had seen hot dinners. If you drag me out of here, you're going to be an accessory to grand larceny. Do you want to go to prison for a guy wearing a fake watch? The bodyguard hesitated. He looked at his boss. He looked at the watch. The second hand was indeed ticking. Click, click, click. Arthur, Zayed roared. The time, it is 8:58 p.m. Pendleton looked at the token. He looked at the prince. The seed of doubt had been planted, but $50 million of desperation is a powerful fertilizer. He was drowning in debt. He needed this to be real. I have to trust him, Pendleton whispered. He looked at Natalie with sad eyes. I'm sorry, miss. Please go. He pressed the final button on the token. Processing. Natalie felt her stomach drop. She had failed. But then a voice cut through the tension from the bar area. Actually, Arthur, I wouldn't do that if I were you. It was Tobias Reed. He was standing 10 feet away, holding his phone up, recording everything. Zayed froze. The two bodyguards immediately shifted their stance, turning toward Tobias, their hands hovering near their waistbands. Who are you? Zayed demanded. Another servant. Tobias Reed, New York Chronicle, Tobias said, stepping closer, ignoring the threatening posture of the guards. And you are… Well, that's the question, isn't it? According to my quick database search on my phone just now, there is no Sheikh Zayed al-Mir in the ruling family's lineage. There's a Zayed al-Nahyan and a Mir al-Thani. But you? You seem to be a remix. You are harassing a diplomat, Zayed shouted. I have immunity. Diplomatic immunity doesn't cover wire fraud in New York State, Tobias said calmly. He looked at Pendleton. Mr. Pendleton, cancel that transfer. It's processing, Pendleton said, his face grey. I can't stop it. Call the bank, Natalie shouted, breaking free from the bodyguard's loosened grip. Call them and flag it as fraud right now. Silence her, Zayed screamed at his men. The bodyguard lunged for Natalie. Natalie didn't scream. She didn't run. She dropped. She had taken Krav Maga classes for 3 years, a necessity when living in volatile regions with her father. As the heavy hand swung toward her shoulder, she ducked, grabbed a heavy glass pitcher of water from the table, and swung it upward in a tight arc. Crack. The heavy glass connected with the bodyguard's elbow. He howled in pain, stumbling back. The restaurant erupted into chaos. Diners were standing up, screaming. Henry was running over, shouting into his radio. You bit! The bodyguard snarled, reaching for her again with his good arm. Enough. The shout came from Natalie, but it wasn't in English. She stood up, straightening her apron, and turned directly to Zayed. She spoke in fluent, rapid-fire Arabic, specifically the Najdi dialect, the prestige dialect of the region he was pretending to be from. Isma ya ibn al-Kalb, la ibuka intahat. Listen, you son of a dog, your game is over. Zayed stared at her. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Natalie continued, stepping closer to him, her voice projecting across the room. She switched to English, so everyone, especially Pendleton and Tobias, could understand. I asked you earlier where you stole the robe. You didn't answer. So let me tell you what I see. Your thobe is polyester. Royals wear cotton or wool blends. Your gutra is tied in the cobra style, which was popular in 2005, not today. And you're not wearing sandals. You're wearing dress shoes with tassels. No self-respecting Gulf Arab wears tasseled loafers with a thobe. She pointed a finger at his chest. But the biggest tell, it's your hands. Zayed looked down at his hands instinctively. You have a callus on your right ring finger, Natalie said, from a wedding ring. But Muslim men don't wear gold wedding bands. It's forbidden. You took it off before you walked in here, didn't you? Where is it? In your pocket? Zayed's hand twitched toward his pocket. It was a subconscious tell, a reflex. And it was all Tobias needed. Gotcha, Tobias said, zooming in with his phone. This is ridiculous, Zayed yelled, backing away. I am leaving. Arthur, you will hear from my lawyers. The money, Pendleton cried out, staring at his tablet. The transfer. It says pending authorization. Cancel it, Natalie screamed. Zayed lunged for the table. He wasn't going for the contract, he was going for Pendleton's tablet. If he could hit confirm on the banking app, the money was gone. He scrambled over the centerpiece, knocking over the wine, the candles, and the bread. He was desperate, feral. "No, you don't," Natalie shouted. She didn't punch him, she didn't tackle him. She grabbed the tablecloth, the heavy, starched, white linen tablecloth, and yanked it with every ounce of strength she possessed. Whoosh! Plates, glasses, cutlery, the centerpiece, the $500 wine, and the prince himself went flying. Zayed lost his footing as the ground beneath him moved. He crashed backward, arms flailing, landing in a heap of broken china and spilled beef juice. Pendleton grabbed his tablet, clutching it to his chest like a baby. "Cancelled," he gasped, tapping the screen frantically. "Transfer cancelled." Zayed scrambled to his feet, his pristine white robes now stained brown and red with sauce and wine. He looked like a demented candy cane. "Get them," he screamed to his bodyguards. "Kill them all." But the bodyguards were looking at the door. Sirens. Not the distant wail of the city, but the close chirping whoop of police cruisers pulling up right outside the glass windows of Le Chateau. "I called them," Tobias said, smiling, "about 5 minutes ago when Natalie sent me a coaster with 911 fraud written on the back." The entry of the NYPD was less dramatic than the movies, but far more effective. 4 officers swarmed in, guns drawn but low. "Drop it," one officer shouted at the bodyguard who was still nursing his elbow. "Hands on your head." The bodyguards, realizing they were not getting paid enough for a shootout with the NYPD, immediately complied. They went down on their knees. Zayed, however, wasn't done. He looked at the window, he looked at the kitchen door, he looked at Natalie. "You," he spat, pointing a sauce-covered finger at her, "you ruined everything. Do you know who I am?" "Yeah," Natalie said, breathing hard. "I think I do." She walked over to him, stepping over the broken glass. The police watched her, confused by the waitress commanding the scene. "Officer," Natalie said to the lead cop, "check his pockets." "Front left." "Miss, step back," the officer warned. "Just check it. He has an ID, and it's not from the Middle East." The officer patted Zayed down. He pulled out a wallet, he flipped it open. He looked at the ID, then at Zayed, then back at the ID. He started laughing. "Sheikh Zayed?" the officer asked dryly. "According to this, you're Gary Fogelman from Trenton, New Jersey." The restaurant, which had been in a state of terrified silence, erupted in murmurs. "Gary," Pendleton whispered, standing up slowly, "I almost gave $50 million to—" "Gary?" Gary Fogelman's face twisted, the accent dropped completely. "It would have worked," he screamed, his voice nasal and distinctly American East Coast. "It was perfect. The paperwork was perfect. You stupid rich idiots will believe anything if someone wraps a towel around their head and calls you brother." "That's enough, Gary," the officer said, spinning him around and cuffing him. "And you," Gary shouted, straining against the cuffs to look at Natalie. "You're just a waitress. How the hell do you know Najdi Arabic?" Natalie crossed her arms. Her uniform was stained, her hair was a mess, and she was likely fired, but she had never felt more like herself. "I'm not just a waitress, Gary," she said coolly. "I'm a student. And you just gave me the best final exam of my life." As they hauled Gary and his goons away, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving Natalie shaking. She sat down on one of the few remaining chairs. Henry, the manager, walked over. He looked at the destruction. The broken plates, the stained carpet, the ruined dinner service. He looked at Natalie. "You realize," Henry said, his voice trembling, "that you destroyed a table setting worth $4,000. Natalie looked up at him. "I just saved a client $50 million, Henry. I think you can deduct the plates from his tip." Pendleton was standing there, still clutching his tablet. He looked like he had aged 10 years and then de-aged 20 in the span of 5 minutes. He walked over to Natalie. Miss Hart," he said, reading her name tag. "Mr. Pendleton." You saved my company," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My employees, my family. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," Natalie said softly. "Just maybe check the watch next time." "I will," he laughed nervously. "I certainly will." Tobias walked over, putting his phone in his pocket. "That was incredible, Natalie. I got it all. The pig comment, the tablecloth pull, the unmasking. This is going viral by morning. You're going to be famous. I don't want to be famous, Natalie sighed. I just want to finish my law degree. Law degree? Pendleton perked up. You're in law school. Final year, NYU night school, she said. Pendleton reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. It was a real one this time. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. Apex Construction has a very large legal department, Pendleton said, and we are looking for associates who have attention to detail and who aren't afraid to flip a table when they smell a rat. Natalie took the card. She looked at it, then up at Pendleton. Is that a job offer? It's an interview, Pendleton smiled. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Don't be late and wear the watch. I don't have a watch, Natalie smiled. Then buy one, Pendleton said. I think you've earned a signing bonus. The adrenaline crash was worse than the fatigue. By the time Natalie Hart got back to her small fourth-floor walk-up in Queens, it was nearly 2 a.m. Her phone, which usually sat dormant with nothing but loan payment reminders and study group texts, was vibrating so constantly it felt like a live wire in her pocket. Tobias Reed hadn't wasted a second. The video was titled "The Waitress Who Took Down a Fake Prince." It had 2 million views in 3 hours. Natalie sat on the edge of her bed, still in her wine-stained uniform, staring at the screen. Comments were scrolling faster than she could read them. She's a legend. Who is she? The way she spoke Arabic. Chills. Give this woman a medal. And a raise. Gary from Trenton, I'm dying. Fake Sheikh. But amidst the praise, the darker side of the internet was already churning. Dossing threats, people claiming the video was staged, bots spamming scams. It was overwhelming. Natalie tossed the phone onto her pillow and buried her face in her hands. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt exposed. For years, she had carefully curated a life of quiet determination. She went to work, she went to class, she studied. She kept her head down. Now her face, her anger, her voice, her violence was public property. She slept for 3 fitful hours, dreaming of sandstorms and broken glass. When she woke up, the sun was slicing through her blinds, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was 7:30 a.m. The interview with Arthur Pendleton was at 9 a.m. She showered, scrubbing the smell of stale champagne and fear from her skin. She didn't have a power suit. Her wardrobe consisted of jeans, oversized sweaters, and her black service uniforms. She dug to the back of her closet and found the one tailored navy blazer she had bought for moot court competitions 3 years ago. It was a little tight across the shoulders now, carrying heavy trays for 12 hours a day built muscle, but it would have to do. She paired it with a crisp white shirt and dark slacks. She pulled her hair back into a severe professional bun. She looked in the mirror. The waitress was gone. The law student was gone. The woman staring back looked like someone who had survived a war and was ready to negotiate the peace treaty. Her phone buzzed again. An unknown number. Hello, Natalie answered, putting it on speaker as she applied mascara. Ms. Hart, this is Detective Miller from the 19th Precinct. Natalie's stomach dropped. Yes, Detective. Is this about my statement? I can come in after. Actually, Ms. Hart, it's a bit more complicated. The detective's voice was weary. Mr. Fogelman, Gary, has retained counsel. A very expensive counsel. They're filing a counter-complaint against you this morning. Natalie froze, the mascara wand hovering in mid-air. A counter-complaint? For what? Exposing him? Assault with a deadly weapon, the detective said. The glass pitcher. He claims he was reaching for his phone to call his lawyer, and you struck him with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. His elbow is fractured. He was trying to steal $50 million, Natalie shouted, her composure cracking. He was reaching for the authorization token. I know that, and you know that. But the video Tobias posted, well, it cuts in after the hit for the most part, or it's shaky. His lawyers are arguing excessive force. They're threatening to sue Le Chateau and you personally for civil damages unless we drop the fraud charges. Natalie sank onto her bed. It was the classic predator move. When cornered, attack. Gary Fogelman wasn't just a con artist. He was a litigious narcissist. If he sued her, she'd be buried in legal fees she couldn't afford. She'd have to drop out of school. She'd lose everything. What do I do? She whispered. "Get a lawyer, Miss Hart, a good one, and don't say anything else to anyone." The line clicked dead. Natalie looked at the clock. 8:15 a.m. She had 45 minutes to get to Midtown. She could cancel. She could hide under the covers. She could cry. She stood up. She grabbed her bag, her law books, and the business card Arthur Pendleton had given her. Apex Construction. She wasn't going to hide. She was going to court, or the next best thing. The headquarters of Apex Construction didn't look like a place where buildings were designed. It looked like a place where gods played chess with the skyline. The tower was a monolith of black glass and steel that pierced the Manhattan clouds, standing aloof from the grime and noise of the streets below. Natalie Hart stood on the sidewalk, craning her neck to see the top. Her neck hurt, her feet hurt, her pride hurt. She checked her reflection in the revolving doors. She was wearing her moot court special, a navy blazer she had bought at a thrift store 3 years ago, paired with a white blouse that she had ironed so aggressively it had almost scorched. It was the armor of an aspiring lawyer, but against the backdrop of Park Avenue, it felt like a costume. A child playing dress-up. Inside the lobby was a cathedral of intimidation. The air was cool and smelled of expensive sanitizer and old money. Men in suits that cost more than her entire student loan balance strode across the marble floors with the confidence of people who had never been told no. Natalie approached the security desk. The guard, a thick-set man with a boredom that seemed etched into his features, didn't look up. Name and destination? Natalie Hart, to see Arthur Pendleton, penthouse level. The guard paused. His eyes flicked up. He looked at her face, then down at a tablet on his desk. On the screen, a muted video was looping, a shaky vertical clip of a blonde waitress smashing a pitcher over a man's arm. The guard's eyebrows shot up. The waitress? From the video? Natalie winced. That's me. The guard's demeanor shifted instantly. A grin broke through the boredom. No way. My wife watched that about 50 times this morning. Said you got a hell of a swing. Mr. Pendleton put a flag on your name. You're VIP today. Elevator bank C, express to the top. Thank you, Natalie murmured, hurrying past the turnstile. The elevator ride was a smooth, silent ascent that made her ears pop. As the numbers climbed, 40, 50, 60, so did her anxiety. She wasn't just here for a job interview, she was here to save her life. The countersuit from Gary Fogelman, the fake sheikh, was a nuclear bomb waiting to detonate her future. If she was convicted of assault, she would be disbarred before she ever took the oath. The doors slid open with a soft chime. The penthouse reception area was sparse and terrifyingly elegant. There was no receptionist. Instead, Arthur Pendleton was waiting for her. He stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city he helped build. When he turned, he looked different. The sweat and desperation of the previous night were gone, replaced by the polished veneer of a CEO. "Natalie," Arthur exclaimed, crossing the room with an outstretched hand. "You made it. I was worried the paparazzi might have blocked your apartment." "I took the back exit," Natalie said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, grateful. "Mr. Pendleton, thank you for seeing me. But we have a problem." Arthur's smile dimmed slightly. "I know, the countersuit. Come in. We need to talk." He led her into his office, a vast space dominated by a mahogany desk that looked like it had been carved from the hull of a galleon. But Arthur didn't sit behind it. He gestured to a seating area of plush leather couches. Sitting on one of those couches was a woman who made the room temperature drop 10 degrees just by existing. She was in her 50s, with silver hair cut into a sharp, architectural bob. Her suit was grey, tailored to within an inch of its life, and she wore no jewelry except for a simple, heavy platinum ring. She was reading a file on a tablet, her eyes scanning the text with predatory speed. "Natalie," Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave. "This is Diana Sterling, my general counsel. She's the person who cleans up the messes." Diana looked up. Her eyes were a piercing, icy blue. She didn't smile. She didn't stand. She just assessed Natalie like she was inspecting a cracked foundation. "So," Diana said, her voice smooth and dry, "you're the waitress who thinks she's Batman." Natalie stiffened. "I'm the law student who stopped a $50 million felony." "And in the process, committed a felony of your own," Diana countered, tapping the screen. Aggravated assault, intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Gary Fogelman has a fractured radial head in his left elbow. His lawyer, a bottom feeder named Silas Thorne, filed the papers an hour ago. He's asking for $2 million in damages and wants the DA to press criminal charges. Diana tossed the tablet onto the coffee table. It slid across the glass surface and stopped right in front of Natalie. "Sit down, Ms. Hart." Natalie sat. She kept her back straight, her hands folded in her lap to hide the trembling. "Arthur wants to hire you," Diana continued, ignoring Arthur's presence entirely. "He thinks you're a hero. He thinks you have grit. I, however, am a pragmatist. If we hire you, Apex Construction becomes party to this circus. Silas Thorne will argue that you were acting as an agent of our CEO. He will drag this company through the mud to get a settlement. He's offering a deal. You recant your statement about the fraud, claim it was a misunderstanding, and Gary drops the assault suit." Arthur looked at Natalie, his expression pained. "I don't want you to do that, Natalie, but the board is terrified of bad press." "It's a simple equation," Diana said coldly. "Your future for our reputation. You recant, you walk away with a clean record, but no job here. Or you fight, we rescind the offer, and you likely go to jail." The room went silent. The hum of the air conditioning sounded like a roar. Natalie looked at the tablet. She looked at the paused video of herself, hair messy, eyes wild, swinging the picture. It looked bad. It looked like rage. But then she looked at Diana. And she realized something. Diana Sterling wasn't kicking her out. If Diana wanted her gone, she would have had security escort her out of the lobby. Diana was testing her. This wasn't a rejection. It was a cross-examination. Natalie took a breath. She let the waitress mask fall away completely. She let the scared student dissolve. She reached into her bag and pulled out her own battered laptop. "No," Natalie said. Diana's eyebrow arched. "No? I won't recant," Natalie said, opening her laptop. "And you won't rescind the offer, because Gary Fogelman isn't going to sue anyone. In fact, by the time I walk out of here, his lawyer will be begging us not to press charges for spoliation of evidence." Diana leaned forward just an inch. "I'm listening." "You watched the video," Natalie said, typing quickly to bring up a frame-by-frame editor she had used for her evidence class. "But you watched it like a civilian. You saw a hit. You need to watch it like a prosecutor." She spun the laptop around. "Look at the timestamp," Natalie pointed, 20:58:12. "This is 3 seconds before impact. Gary is screaming at Arthur to sign. He claims the transfer deadline is 9 p.m. "We know this," Diana said, unimpressed. "He was creating urgency." "He was creating fraudulent urgency," Natalie corrected. "I checked the SWIFT routing number on the document he tried to get Arthur to sign. It routes through the Cayman Islands branch of First Sovereign. I called their clearinghouse this morning. Their international wire desk closes for maintenance every Friday at 8:45 p.m. EST. The deadline was a lie. The transaction was physically impossible." "That proves fraud," Diana noted. "It doesn't justify you breaking his arm." "Wait," Natalie said. She advanced the video frame by frame. "Here, 20:58:15. I accuse him. He realizes the con is blown. Look at his eyes. He's not looking at me. He's looking at the table." Natalie tapped the screen. "What is he reaching for?" "The tablet," Arthur interjected. "My banking tablet." "Exactly," Natalie said. "But look at his hand. Is his index finger extended to tap send?" "No, his hand is a fist. He's holding a heavy brass paperweight from the table setting." She zoomed in. The blurry image showed Gary's hand wrapped around a heavy object, descending toward the fragile screen of Arthur's device. "He wasn't trying to complete the transfer," Natalie said, her voice gaining strength. "He knew the transfer was dead. He was trying to smash the tablet." Diana was silent now, her eyes glued to the screen. "Why?" Natalie asked, answering her own question. "Because that tablet has a front-facing biometric camera that records every transaction attempt. It had his face, his retinal scan, and the geolocator data proving he was the one authorizing the fraud. That tablet was the only direct physical evidence linking him to the crime." Natalie looked up at Diana. "I didn't hit him to protect Arthur. I didn't hit him because I was angry. I struck his arm to intercept a destruction of evidence in progress during the commission of a Class B felony. Under New York Penal Law, Section 3530, a private person may use physical force upon another person when he or she reasonably believes such to be necessary to effect an arrest or prevent the escape of a person who has committed a felony. Natalie leaned back, and under the Good Samaritan statutes regarding the preservation of digital forensics, my actions are protected from civil liability. I wasn't assaulting a man, I was securing a crime scene. Diana stared at the laptop, then she looked at the freeze frame of Gary's fist holding the paperweight. It was grainy, but it was undeniable. Slowly, a smile spread across Diana Sterling's face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. Spoliation of evidence, Diana whispered. Attempted obstruction of justice. And since he was holding a brass weight, Natalie added, he was arguably armed, so my use of the picture was proportional force against a weapon. Diana let out a short, sharp laugh. She looked at Arthur. Arthur, give her the contract. Arthur blinked, confused. The employment contract. Yes, and double the signing bonus. Diana stood up and walked over to the window, pulling out her phone. I'm going to call Silas Thorne. I'm going to send him this screenshot, and then I'm going to tell him that if he doesn't withdraw the suit in 10 minutes, Apex Construction will file a countersuit for malicious prosecution, and we will personally fund a forensic audit of every client he has represented in the last 10 years. She turned back to Natalie. You have a killer instinct, Hart. Most law students would have argued self-defense. You went on the offensive. You didn't just defend yourself, you criminalized his reaction. Natalie felt the tension leave her body in a rush, leaving her lightheaded. Does that mean... It means you're hired, Arthur beamed, sliding a thick envelope across the table. Associate legal counsel, pending your bar results, of course, but I have a feeling you won't have trouble with the exam. Natalie took the envelope. It felt heavy. It felt real. One condition, Diana said, ending her call, that blazer. Natalie looked down at her thrift store jacket. I know, it's unprofessional. It's tragic, Diana said, though her eyes were twinkling with something resembling respect. Your signing bonus is substantial. Go to Bergdorf's, 5th floor. Ask for Eleanor. Tell her Diana sent you. Buy a suit that tells people you can break their arm legally. Yes, ma'am, Natalie said. And Natalie, Arthur added, standing up. About last night. You saved me from losing everything. My father built this company from a single truck. If I had lost it to a con artist... He trailed off, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't just save the money. You saved my family's legacy. You will always have a place here. Natalie stood up. She felt taller. The waitress who had walked in, the girl who was afraid of being invisible, was gone. Thank you, Arthur, she said. I won't let you down. She walked out of the office, past the smiling security guard, and into the elevator. As the doors closed, she was alone again. She leaned her head back against the cool metal wall and closed her eyes. She thought of the years of double shifts, the nights spent studying in the break room while the kitchen staff played cards, the rude customers, the aching feet, the constant gnawing fear that she would never be anything more than just a waitress. She opened the envelope. Inside was a contract. The starting salary was more money than her father had made in 10 years. But it wasn't the money that made her throat tight. It was the title printed under her name, Natalie Hart, Esquetastem pending. The elevator dinged at the lobby. The doors opened. The world outside was the same, noisy, chaotic, indifferent. But Natalie stepped out into the sunlight with a different stride. She pulled out her phone. She had one text to send. She opened her messages and typed to her dad. I got the job, and I think I just won my first case. She hit send. Then she hailed a cab. She wasn't taking the subway today. She had a suit to buy. We often walk through life ignoring the people who serve us, the waitresses, the drivers, the cleaners, assuming their uniforms define their worth. But as Natalie proved, brilliance doesn't wear a price tag, and courage doesn't need a title. She reminded a billionaire and a con artist that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you overlook. In a world full of fake princes and plastic watches, be the one who knows the truth. Be the one who speaks the language. Be the one who isn't afraid to flip the table when the game is rigged. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold with a side of broken glass, please smash that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a twist. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that they are more than their job title. Thanks for watching and see you in the next story.